Well, good morning. Welcome to another little video about the spiritual path and remembering, of course, that there is no real path. It's just an action of mind that makes a choice in this moment to be happy or not, So that is the journey, really, when people talk about the journey, and there's a lot of chit-chat that happens about spiritual this and spiritual that, but it's really simply just that choice. You're learning to choose again, to make a better decision where what your results of your last decision brought you can be changed, if that makes sense. We're dealing with our karma, dealing with cause and effect relationships, and how we interact with those relationships according to the perception of ourselves that we hold about ourselves. If that perception is divine, then we will see the other person as a divine encounter. If our perception of ourselves is temporal and subject to the yin and yang, the good and bad, the right and wrong, the mine and yours, the opposites of time and space, then we will get that kind of result. And I should say, I will get that kind of result, keeping it totally singular. One of the things I thought I would add in today's video was a little bit that I left out of the video I made about declarations. And if you haven't watched the declarations video, I suggest go on my page and just scroll back a few posts. You'll find it about 8 or 9 posts back, and just have a watch of the declarations video. And I'm uploading most of my videos to YouTube now. I find it's a lot quicker than putting them directly on Facebook, which seems for some reason to use a lot more of my data on my little telephone here and thing. But anyway, so I'll just put a link. So I'll put the YouTube link on my Facebook page, if that makes sense. But the addition that I wanted to make was that declarations are also very useful. So just to briefly recap on a declaration, I make my declaration of my perfection, of my wholeness. Whether I've experienced that as my own illumination of mind or not doesn't matter, right? It's a line in the sand. So I stand up and I declare to my world in one way or another that my perfection comes from God, comes from Source, comes from the universal mind, the creative power of all things, not from my capacity to solicit approval or whatever in the world. There's no such thing as perfect in the world, and the closest thing that you will find to perfection in the world is the admission of imperfection. It's like I'm perfectly imperfect. But that's kind of like a good place to be. The acceptance of all things exactly as they are in the world is one of the keys to allowing and enabling the experience of the world to be one that doesn't weigh on your shoulders like a bag of bricks. It's like, no, well, of course the world is this and the world is that, because that's what the world represents, which is the denial of unconditional love. But anyway, using the getting back to it, using the declaration, I make my declaration that my wholeness and perfection is of love. And then the next thing that comes back to me is somebody scoffing, or somebody asking me what drugs I'm smoking, or or somebody, like, you're an idiot, whatever, or even my own thoughts, which ultimately manifest my reflection anyway. But in the idea that I'm learning to be vigilant for the kingdom of heaven within me, or the state of inner peace, perfect peace within me, it is my own thoughts ultimately that are my detractors from that state, that draw me out of it, regardless of what seems to be going on out there, because my thoughts project my reality. Right? And the idea then that the reflections I get back whether internal or external, about my declaration, as I true up to my declaration through learning to stand defenselessly against the emotional gift, and it's a gift, that is returned to me from my declaration because it's usable, right? If somebody rebukes me or says I'm an idiot, or my own internal thinking feels like a fool for making such a declaration or anything like that, and the ego always has this kind of attitude, the emotionality contained in that package of what comes back is useful in offering the prayer of the heart for the healing of the mind, and thus clearing away some of the dross. Now, what also happens, because lessons are learned in cycles, right? Lessons are repeated until they are learned. And in making a declaration, I am really asking, in a certain sense, to bear witness to the learning of that lesson in me, of my perfection, right? So I'll react to what comes back, until finally I don't. So in seeing then that I am to, there's a beautiful array of birds here at the moment. We've got a blue kingfisher on the branch there and 2 brown wood doves just over there. So I know you can't see them. I'll just spin that around maybe. Oh, the kingfisher just flew away, but there are the doves in the distance there. Don't know if you can see them. They're quite a rare dove. I forget what they're called, but they're on the branch. Anyway, a little sidetracked. Sometimes the manifest nature of beauty is, the beauty of nature is, that's why I live out in the bush. I love it out here. So, the kingfisher just attacked the doves and they all flown away. So there you go. Time and space in a nutshell. That's perfect. So, okay, so back to it. The returning reflection that I get having made my declaration, I'm whole and perfect as God created me, as spirit, and obviously not flesh, because the flesh is never perfect. It's always just food for the worms. I'm whole and perfect as God created me. I stand in that, and then the next thing, somebody will say something, or my thoughts, whatever, and I get to see the emotionality. I get to see that package of emotionality in me about that returning result, about that reflection that I get back, and I get to use that in prayer, right? Now, think of it as a weight. It's like, oh, that felt terrible. That person said I was an idiot, and that made me feel in my heart, and and that if you can flip it over, right? I use that for the prayer of the heart. Take this from me, heal my mind of all of this denial, right? Because it's my denial being reflected back at me, my denial of my declaration that I'm whole and perfect as God created, because the world is the denial symbolically of my perfection, of spirit, of love, of unconditional love. That's the experience of the human condition, the experience of separation from source, separation from God. And everything in the world, in one way or another, reflects that. Not everything here dies, but love is eternal. So do the math. So then I get to use that for prayer, and I'd be still, breathe, and undergo the emotional release, whatever that looks like, of that emotional package, of just allowing it to be taken through the spirit of holiness, or the Holy Spirit, to be replaced by a sense of peace and a sense of self, and that connection with all things, regardless of the various meanings of things that I've projected onto. This person said a good comment and this person said a bad comment. Neither of those things have any bearing on my truth, good or bad. Yet whilst I still find myself reacting to them, perhaps appreciating the good comments and wanting to fend off the bad ones, I'm still not free in my own association within myself. I still believe that my identity is somehow validated by the good or the bad, the right or the wrong, the love or the hatred of my declaration. And beware the demon of external validation. Yet external validation or external references and external reflections initially, until you learn to go within and make the transitions within your own thinking so that you don't have to project it out there, those reflections are really very valuable. But in that declaration, in the honesty of that prayer for the healing of the mind, you'll get to see how honest you were in that heartfelt prayer by whether or not the next time you make a declaration, that reflection that comes back to you is something that you react to or not. And you have to be honest about it. You can't be all spiritual about it and, that's their journey and this is mine. They're allowed to say, no, there's no such thing as their journey and my journey. There is only my experience of self. I have to keep my finger on my nose and keep it singular. There's no other person out there. There's no witness to the truth in me that is possible in the physical realm. Only a joining that is possible when through a collaborative venture, which we call salvation, I join with other minds in the perfection of my wholeness, in the perfection of my creative reality, which has nothing to do with the physical realm. And that's more of a meditative entering in like that, where you just mastered that inner. Thank you. You get all sorts of funny things happen through the body when you practice meditation for a period of time. But now I completely lost track of everything then. But anyway, a lesson is repeated until it is learned. So it's the same thing as if you have this ongoing argument or ongoing situation with somebody at work or somebody at home, let's say, and lessons are learnt through relationships, a relationship with this leaf or a relationship with the universe at whole or one individual person, situation or event, whatever. But I'm sure everyone will understand it and be aware of or relate to the idea that we can have this ongoing push me, pull you kind of reacting, attack and defense situation with, let's say, somebody at work who pushes our buttons all the time. And it's like, oh no, there's that person again. Well, that's a perfect opportunity to practice the defenselessness of a whole declaration. Right? Why would you be concerned about what anyone thinks when your reality is only validated through the experience of your divine union in God? Nothing on earth can tell you who you are, what you're about, what your purpose is, and whether you're doing a good job or a bad job or anything of anything. It's completely meaningless. The world cannot tell you who you are. So learning then to use the tools of your spiritual trade, if you want to call it that, to make new decisions about yourself, to enact new frequencies of expression. Right? And the more you clear away in here, the more peaceful you will become and the more open you will be with your world, with nothing left to hide, about the truth of you. It's like I know perfectly well within myself, I'm whole and perfect as God created me. I've had an experience of the illumination of my mind in my enlightenment experience, which I am declaring my perfection from to this world, which is designed to shoot me down and reject it and reject me, reject that declaration. And I know perfectly well that that's okay. But I'm not going to use the idea that that's okay to defend myself from what I really feel about what comes back at me. And I've had everything come back at me. Some people are incredibly appreciative of the declaration, and other people think it's completely weird. And personally, I've made a decision within myself that I don't care what anyone thinks about it, and I'm staying true to that and trying to be honest within myself about how I actually feel in my relationship with being true to that when something comes back. You know, and nowadays I don't care at all. Of course, if someone calls me an idiot, and it's like, well, of course I'm an idiot. I'm everything in time and space. It's all water off a duck's back, sticks and stones. Why would I care what anyone thinks of me? Why should you care what anyone thinks of you? Why do you worry about what you think about yourself? Worry cannot do anything for you whatsoever. It just ties you up in knots. And I like the biblical teaching by Jesus. You know, you cannot change one hair on your head from black to white or from grey to brown by worrying. What's the point of it? You know, and you have to look at it. What is the point of it? At some point you make a decision. I'm not going to worry about stuff. Forget it. If something happens that goes this way and something happens that goes that way, I'll go with the flow. I won't worry about it. It's like, all right, that's obviously what it's meant to be. I'm going to let go of how I think things ought to look in the world, because I really don't know what the fuck the world is as an experience that I find myself within anyway. I'm told it's an experience of the denial of unconditional love that I am manifesting and projecting the meaning onto it that I've given that it seems to have for me. I don't know that. That's only a spiritual perspective that I'm told. Dave's telling me that, or a book is telling me that, or the prophets are telling me that, or something's telling me that I'm getting the results of my own thinking. I don't know that for myself as my own experience. I need to be able to learn to experience that for myself so that I can begin to have a connection with the power of my mind, even as it shows up in the denial of self, so that I can begin to make new choices about myself to affect a different reflection, one that shows me that I am becoming in the world but not of it, and that I am becoming a passerby to the idea of the things that seem to show up in the physical plane. And the things that show up in the physical plane can be very tempting in their allure. You know, right now we're going through this coronavirus thing, and it's very tempting to want to validate it with fears and with whatever and everything else. But the simple fact of the matter remains, there's no such thing as death. You'll experience that in the illumination of your mind. And you just follow the instructions. It doesn't matter. The will of God is perceived through all things. You know, there is nothing but the will of God. And if you see it as the physical manifestation of a disease, etc., then you're not seeing it properly. But if you're seeing it as the direction, your own inner instruction to self for how to see things correctly, then you're seeing it truly in a way that you can use to benefit you. So you just simply follow the instructions, and I think it's pretty clear to most people in regard to that one particular situation. The instructions are simply to stay at home, and I look at the idea of that of staying at home. It's like, oh, of course, of course, stay at home. It's like humanity as a vibrational essence is raising up. It's like the vibration is raising up. And I forget the parable. Somebody might be able to comment on it down below about the weeds in the seeds. Some will grow to be a good crop, and some will become weeds and whatever. The words of God's words will fall upon those who can use them and those who are deaf, equally. But what do you do with it? And I did a terrible job of that one. But of course, stay at home. One of the things that happens in spiritual pursuit, and it's a very early on kind of concern that I find many students, especially course students, have, is utilizing time, finding time to do your lessons, finding time to practice your meditation, finding time. And it's like all of a sudden, I can't go to work. I'm told to stay at home. I have all this time on my hands. It's really quite a gift. But the idea, and I've had people say to me, how can you see things like that? People are out there dying, and people are out there getting sick, and people are out there. It's like that's always been the case. World War One, World War Two, a tsunami, a volcano, the Black Plague. This is just another particular instance of the what do you call it? The undependable nature of time and space, or perhaps the dependable nature of time and space to reveal the obvious that it's completely undependable as a platform for life and for the experience of life. Everything here is temporary. So it's like, all right, understanding that everything is temporary, how is that going to help me? Well, for a start, let me look at that temporary nature of what I think life is, and let me compare it to what I'm told life is as an eternally abiding love, as my truth. Now, you have to make a choice. It's like, I understand not everybody, Jesus said in the Bible, 2 in 10,000 will hear this. And I like to think that humanity, the consciousness, the conscious collective, if that's, the thing, has raised up enough in its vibratory expression to begin to understand and integrate the concepts and principles of spirituality more and more and more, to the stage where perhaps it's no longer 2 in 10,000 that will hear this, and maybe 2 in 100. That would be great. Or 2 in 4, or 2 out of 2. But it's only ever me that needs to hear this. So in the acceptance of atonement for myself, in the acceptance of oneness, in my willingness, in my little willingness to allow the Spirit in me to connect me through all things, there is my participation in the acceptance of that within myself through the giving up of the world. And one of the greatest ways to do that I've discovered is through making those declarations. I'm done with the world. I'm whole and perfect as God created me. And then the next thing that shows up is, oh, look, something shiny. A new motorcycle. All right, well, I love you. I just thought I'd add that one to the mix. And if you didn't watch the first video about making a declaration, just go back to my page. It'll be more helpful to you. Go back to my page, watch that one, then come back and watch this one. And I probably should have put that at the beginning, or maybe I did. All right, I love you.